My name is Nathan Reed, and I'm 48 years old. For the past 23 years, I've poured my life into plumbing here in Augusta, Georgia, building a solid reputation one repair at a time. I've fixed countless pipes, installed water heaters in every season, and earned the trust of families who came to know me not just as a tradesman, but as someone who showed up on time, did the job right, and treated their homes with respect. That simple work ethic guided every part of my life, including my marriage. At least, that's what I believed. May 22nd was meant to be one of my proudest days. My son, Tyler, after 4 years of late nights, exams, and juggling part-time jobs, was graduating from Augusta University with a degree in engineering. Seeing him in his cap and gown, shoulders back, pride shining in his eyes, filled me with a joy I can hardly describe. We shook hands with his professors, smiled for photos, and drove home ready to celebrate everything he'd achieved. Lillian, my wife of 22 years, had organized a modest but meaningful gathering in our backyard. White tablecloths draped over rented tables, soft string lights glowed between the oak trees, and the buffet stretched with enough food for 30 guests. Friends, neighbors, Tyler's grandparents, and my brother's family all gathered, laughing over old stories and marveling at how fast Tyler had grown. About an hour into the evening, when plates were nearly empty and people were leaning back in their chairs, Lillian stood up and tapped her wine glass with fork. I assumed she was about to toast our son, maybe congratulate him or thank everyone for coming. Instead, she looked directly at me with an expression I couldn't place, cold, distant, resolved, and began. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said calmly. "This is a special day for Tyler, and I'm incredibly proud of him. But I also want to make an announcement about Nathan and me." The conversations around the tables faded into silence. I straightened, confused but unsuspecting. Then she said it. After 22 years of marriage, she was filing for divorce. She claimed she had outgrown this life, that she deserved more than what I could offer, and she wasn't willing to settle any longer. Utter disbelief rippled through the crowd. Tyler's fork slipped from his hand. My mother-in-law gasped. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for anger, heartbreak, anything. But I sat frozen, trying to process the humiliation unfolding in front of our closest friends. And she wasn't finished. She announced she had already hired a lawyer, that she knew exactly what she was entitled to, our house, our savings, everything we had built. She lifted her glass in a twisted toast. Here's to new beginnings and getting what you deserve. Within minutes, the celebration died. Guests murmured awkward farewells and slipped away like witnesses leaving a courthouse. Tyler hugged me before leaving with his girlfriend, whispering, "Dad, I'm so sorry." I told him it wasn't his fault and that we'd talk later. Soon, only Lillian and I remained. She went upstairs without another glance, while I stayed outside, gathering plates in the quiet darkness. The string lights still glowed, but the night felt unbearably hollow. Just hours earlier, this yard had echoed with pride and laughter. Now it felt like the ruins of a life I thought I understood. But what Lillian didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't blindsided. 3 months earlier, in February, I had begun to notice things. Little inconsistencies. Bank statements showing withdrawals in parts of town she never visited. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, always for two. A $132 purchase from Victoria's Secret for lingerie I never saw. Years in plumbing teach you to catch the smallest leak before it destroys everything. So I began watching. I printed bank records, copied statements, traced every charge. What I uncovered churned my stomach. In March, she took a weekend visit to her sister in Savannah, except the card showed a luxury suite at the Bohemian Hotel. Nearly $300 a night, plus dinners and wine bars. Her sister has a guest room. When I casually asked later, she lied, claiming they stayed in and watched movies. In April, she bought a $548 man's watch at Macy's. She said it was an early birthday gift for Tyler. But Tyler's never worn a watch in his life. I stayed silent. I kept collecting proof. I let her believe she was in control. She thought she chose the battlefield. She has no idea I've already drawn the map. But Tyler's birthday isn't until November, And he still wears the same old Timex I gave him when he graduated high school, a watch with scratches on the glass and a worn leather band he refuses to replace. That's when the pattern truly began to take shape. Lillian had claimed she'd joined a book club back in February, meeting every Tuesday evening, but there were no receipts for books, no new titles on her nightstand, nothing but recurring hotel charges at the downtown Marriott, same day, same time, $79 plus tax. I'm no detective, but after a decade as a plumber, I understand patterns. Pipes don't lie. Pressure builds, leaks form, and eventually, something bursts. People, I was learning, operate the same way. So I hired a private investigator, Rick Santos, a name passed to me years ago by a client going through a divorce. Rick was efficient, discreet, methodical. Within 2 weeks, he delivered everything: photos, timestamps, even his full name, Dennis Caldwell. 38, recently divorced, a sales manager at a BMW dealership, driving a sleek black 2023 BMW X3, the kind of man who thrives on polished charm. Lillian had been seeing him since January, timing their meetings perfectly with my late-night service calls. Rick's photos show them entering hotel rooms, hands intertwined, heads close, kissing in dim parking garages like teenagers. He even obtained receipts proving Dennis bought the watch she claimed was for Tyler. It wasn't. It was for him. But betrayal is never content with one wound. Rick uncovered a hidden savings account Lillian opened at Georgia Bank and Trust, quietly siphoning money from our joint finances, always in amounts under $700 to avoid alerts. Over 4 months, she moved $21,000. On top of that, she took over $9,000 in cash advances from our credit cards at scattered ATMs, all funding her future with Dennis. On my dime, earned sweating under sinks and crawling through crawl spaces in the Georgia heat. I had evidence, but I needed protection. I called James Mitchell, my closest friend since high school, now a seasoned family law attorney. When I told him everything, he paused, voice heavy with experience. Nathan, she's not just unfaithful. She's dismantling your life piece by piece before walking away. But Georgia law is clear: adultery and financial misconduct change everything. James offered to represent me, not as a client, but as a brother. We met that Monday in his office, spreading Rick's findings across the polished mahogany table. Photos, statements, transfers. This is actually in your favor. James said. Georgia recognizes fault. What she's done, morally and financially, puts leverage in your hands. We're not playing defense. We file a counterpetition. We protect everything you've built. Then he reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten: our prenuptial agreement. Lillian insisted on it 22 years ago, calling it a safety net for us both. She believed it would shield her. She never imagined it might save me. I'd agreed to that prenuptial clause reluctantly all those years ago, believing it hinted at doubt rather than security, never imagining it would become my strongest shield. Lillian had insisted on including a fidelity clause, demanding that any spouse who committed adultery would forfeit rights to the marital home, retirement accounts, and spousal support. Without realizing it, she had authored her own downfall. We filed our counterpetition on May 20th, just 2 days before Tyler's graduation, ensuring the legal wheels were turning before she could move another dollar or bury more secrets. The timing was deliberate. She thought she held the power when she publicly exposed her intentions, unaware I'd been preparing in silence for months. The morning after the disastrous graduation party, she came downstairs smiling, coffee in hand, satisfied with the spectacle she'd staged. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, acting as though nothing had shattered. "I'll be meeting with my lawyer this afternoon," she said lightly, spreading butter on her toast. "We should have the paperwork filed by the end of the week. I assume you'll need to find your own attorney, though I doubt you can afford anyone competent." I took a slow sip of coffee and answered calmly, "Already taken care of." Her brow lifted. "You hired someone already? That was quick." "Who?" "James Mitchell." The color drained from her face. James was well known in Augusta, a ruthless family law attorney with a flawless record, and more importantly, my closest friend for 3 decades. James won't work for free, Nathan. His retainer alone is more than you make in 2 months. How are you paying him? I stood, sliding my chair back. That's between James and me. I have to get to work. Mrs. Peterson's sink is leaking. Later that afternoon, while I was installing a garbage disposal, James called. Lillian's lawyer reached out, he said. They want to know why we filed a counterpetition before papers were served. She walked straight into our trap, Nathan. Her public announcement at the party helped establish intent. He added, her attorney is Robert Finch. He's competent but predictable. He has no idea what we're holding. A court date was set for July 18th, nearly 2 months away. In that time, Lillian grew bolder, acting as though the house was already hers. She began bringing Dennis to our home in broad daylight, his black BMW parked in our driveway like a trophy. She bought designer clothes, styled her hair at upscale salons, and carried herself like a queen awaiting coronation. She believed I was powerless. What she didn't know was that Rick Santos was still tracking every move, every visit, every purchase, every smug display. In early July, she made her greatest mistake. During my routine Monday bank review, I discovered an attempted $16,000 transfer to her secret account. The bank froze it, flagging it as unusual and requiring joint approval. I immediately called James. She just handed us the smoking gun, he said, barely containing his satisfaction. During pending divorce proceedings, that's contempt of court, major financial misconduct. It strengthens everything. When the court hearing began in Richmond County Superior Court, presided over by Judge Patricia Coleman, a woman notorious for her intolerance of deceit, Lillian strode in wearing a sleek black dress that likely cost more than a month's mortgage. Dennis sat smugly behind her. She whispered confidently to Finch, occasionally casting victorious glances my way. James and I sat silently. I wore my best suit, the same one from Tyler's graduation. James laid out our evidence with surgical precision. Photographs, financial statements, bank transfers, investigator logs. Finch presented first, painting me as an absent, emotionally detached husband, requesting half of all assets, the house, my business equipment, retirement accounts, and $1,800 a month in spousal support for 5 years. He claimed Lillian sought companionship due to neglect, careful not to mention her affair. Then James rose slowly. Your Honor, he began steadily, we have irrefutable proof of Mrs. Reed's adultery and systematic financial misconduct. He placed the first photo, Lillian and Dennis entering the Marriott on a Tuesday, on the evidence table. Then another of them kissing in a parking garage. Receipt after receipt followed, documenting luxury dinners, hotel rooms, and gifts purchased with marital funds. Lillian's confidence began to fracture. But James pressed further. Bank transfers totaling $21,000, $9,000 in cash advances, and the attempted $16,000 withdrawal during litigation. Her mask crumbled. The courtroom, once hers in her imagination, had become her reckoning. Mrs. Reed had stolen over $30,000 from a marital estate while carrying on an affair, and James concluded firmly that under Georgia law and the terms of the prenuptial agreement she herself had insisted on, she had forfeited any claim to marital property or spousal support. Judge Coleman reviewed the evidence with a calm, methodical demeanor, asking Lillian's attorney several pointed questions he failed to answer convincingly. She carefully examined the prenuptial agreement, lingering on the fidelity clause that left no room for interpretation. Finally, she delivered her ruling with a voice that was steady and unwavering. After evaluating all evidence presented, the court found that Mrs. Reed had committed adultery as defined by Georgia law and engaged in deliberate financial misconduct throughout the marriage. The agreement signed in 2003 explicitly stated that adultery nullified any entitlement to the marital residence, retirement accounts, or spousal support. Lillian's complexion drained to a ghostly white, and Dennis shifted uneasily in his seat behind her, clearly feeling the weight of the moment. Furthermore, Judge Coleman continued, Mrs. Reed's attempt to transfer marital funds without court approval during the proceedings constituted contempt of court, revealing a pattern of deception and theft the court refused to ignore. Looking directly at her, the judge declared that she had 30 days to vacate the marital home. Mr. Reed would retain sole ownership of the residence, all retirement accounts, and his plumbing business. She was ordered to reimburse the marital estate $20,000 and to pay Mr. Reed's legal fees totaling $7,200. The gavel struck with sharp finality. Lillian sat motionless before erupting in disbelief, insisting the house was half hers, claiming 22 years of residence entitled her to something. She turned to her lawyer in desperation, demanding an appeal, but Robert Finch, weary and defeated, urged her to lower her voice, explaining the agreement was airtight and the evidence damning. That was when she turned her fury on me, accusing me of orchestrating everything. I rose slowly, met her glare, and replied quietly that I had not destroyed her. She had destroyed herself. I had merely documented it. She stormed out with Dennis trailing behind, looking as if he wished to vanish. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within a week, Dennis stopped answering her calls, and as Rick Santos informed me, he relocated to BMW's Atlanta branch, unwilling to be tethered to scandal. Her social circle disintegrated just as fast. Those who had applauded her arrogance at Tyler's graduation now avoided her entirely. Even her sister, who had once believed her Savannah lies, severed all contact. Lillian moved into a modest Southside apartment and took a department store job at the Augusta Mall, folding clothes for $13 an hour, a harsh contrast to the life she once boasted she deserved. Meanwhile, my life transformed. Without her constant criticism, I rediscovered peace. Work became fulfilling again, and I hired 2 eager apprentices, expanded my business through word of mouth, and finally charging rates worthy of the craftsmanship I provided. Tyler visited often, bringing his girlfriend Sarah, and during one evening by the grill, he confessed he had never liked how his mother treated me and believed I deserved far better. I renovated a house, quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, luxury vinyl flooring, turning what she took for granted into something I proudly owned. For months after the divorce, a letter arrived from her attorney, pleading for a reduction in the reimbursement due to her financial hardship. James explained she could barely afford rent and was begging to cut the $20,000 to $4,000 over 2 years. I needed only 30 seconds to refuse. She made her choices, and she would live with them. Had she been honest, we could have divorced fairly. Instead, she chose betrayal and humiliation. The court agreed, ordering full payment or wage garnishment and potential jail time. That Christmas, Tyler and Sarah spent the holiday with me. We cooked dinner, exchanged gifts by the fireplace, and talked about his future. It was peaceful, a kind of peace that never existed when Lillian controlled the atmosphere. Looking back, I saw that her arrogance, her need to publicly declare her intentions, had given me the strength to fight. Had she approached with honesty, I might have compromised, but her greed sealed her fate. I learned that revenge doesn't always require rage or theatrics. Sometimes it's patience, preparation, and allowing people collapse under their own decisions. Lillian tried to take everything, yet walked away with nothing. Today, at 50 years old, I am debt-free, running a thriving plumbing business that supports 3 families. I have learned to see red flags clearly, to value integrity above all, and understand that calm resilience is more powerful than anger ever could be.